Um, I think we can talk about that self-perception versus reality. Shelly, what you think? Maybe touch on that. We want to transition to that. So I'm going to focus on self-perception versus reality, and I'm coming from the position of an individual who I like to say I have a history of incarceration. And not that I have personally been incarcerated, but I come from, as Shelly mentioned earlier, those adverse children experiences, living in trauma. I'm from the hood, if I can say that, right? And so where gun violence, where death, where tragedy, where people dying on a regular basis and things that the normal person in a suburban environment would not experience, was accustomed to that. That was normal. So we internalized that. I internalized that growing up. It was the norm, right? And as I got older and as I'm at this age, realizing that I came from trauma. So a lot of the things that I have done in my life and the things that I've experienced was as a result of my upbringing and my childhood. And so coming from a history of incarceration, my father was incarcerated, my brothers, my uncles. So that was normal. That was normal for me to be in fellowship or communicating with them when they were behind the wall. So it wasn't odd for me when my husband, I married him while he was incarcerated. It was normal. Like, why not? This is normal behavior for me. It's nothing odd. This is what happens in my culture or in my neighborhood or in my life. And it wasn't until recently when I learned my father, when I was born many, many moons ago, my father was in Elmira Correctional Facility, which is in upstate New York, for those who are familiar with the New York State prison system. And so when he was there and I was born, he was so happy and he tattooed my name on his arm. This was a different time many years ago, obviously, in the 70s. So, certain things were easily done more so than now. So he tattooed my name on his arm, and that is the only tattoo that he has. So fast forward as an adult, remember my father tattooed his name on his arm in Elmira. I got married in Elmira to my husband, who is no longer my husband. But I didn't know that until went through a series of different events. And, it just, the irony of that when I was born, my father was in Elmira. And then when I became an adult, I married my husband in the same exact location. And that's just, once again, just not even realizing how certain events in our lives could we can say generational curses, or however you want to coin it, just kind of repeat itself in our lives. So during my particular journey, through my relationship with my spouse during incarceration, once again, only speaking from a person who had a loved ones in prison, and what that looks like from my perspective. There is a level of isolation that, as a loved one of an incarcerated person, that you experience. There's isolation because of the stigma, the stereotype that's attached to this situation that you are a part of, right? We don't necessarily, or let me preface it with we necessarily go and tell people about the situation that I was in, where my husband was, and all of that, because of the shame, so to speak, that might be attached to that, because of the judgment that might come from people who may not understand or who may judge adversely. And so those years that I spent and loved that individual at that time as my spouse, my sense of self was tied into that whole culture, that whole environment, that whole experience, right? The trailer visits, the phone calls, the commissary, just everything that's associated with that. So now I know what's going on behind the wall while he's there. And, and I know the role that I'm playing, but then now when he comes home, that's a transition. Who am I now that he's home? And who am I now when things may not be necessarily going the way they should be? Once again, we're no longer together. We're divorced. But one of the issues that I faced during the course of that divorce and that journey was a journey to find who I was once again, right? And that was deep introspection, deep reflection, drawing closer to God, just reestablishing that relationship with my faith and my Lord, my Savior, just really starting to look at my life, even my childhood. And that's how I found out certain things in regards to my father and his incarceration, and just really starting to just really look deeply into myself, because I was really lost, because for so long I had identified with that person, that lifestyle, that experience. And when it no longer was there, it was like, what next? What happens after the bed? Who am I? What do I do? How am I going to do it? Right? But at the same time, I can say that he could have been going through the same thing that I was going through. Whether or not he articulated that, or we had that conversation, that communication was there, it was not. But I can't, if I know that I was going through these changes, I can only assume that this individual may very well have been going through those same things as well. And so, what did I do? I just keep moving forward and experiencing life from where I am at this particular moment, and enjoying learning me. And that's going back to my most authentic self. And I'm in an excellent, excellent place, but it's a journey of day by day, moment by moment, and just really having the hope for something better for myself. So self-perception, we can easily identify with the environments that we come from, the people that we associate with, but you have to be self-aware. You have to be able to know who you are, understand who you are. And I think that one thing that prison does is it strips, as you said earlier, Shelly, it's such a dehumanizing place that it strips you of your identity. So then once you do come home, whether you're on one side of the wall or the other, then it's that space where you try to figure out, who am I? Mm-hmm. And I think, personally, I think that's a place where a lot of people may be. But I always like to hear from lived experience. So I'm going to ask Carlos to jump in right now and kind of put his 2 cents on that.
Okay.
All right, Carlos, can you introduce yourself real quick too?
Yes, I can. So I'm a formerly incarcerated individual. I'm an artist, author, man. motivational speakers, a few things I do. There's a lot that y'all said, but I'm gonna try to start off with what Latasha said first. So, who are you is the question, basically. Because you go from, the first question was, I'm gonna backtrack, but it's all gonna tie in. The first question that was on the panel that Shelly said was, how does being incarcerated impact an individual's sense of self? So you go from being, as in my perspective or in my life, I was independent. I sold drugs. I helped take care of my parents. I took care of myself since from 16 up until 24. And you go from being independent to dependent. I now have to depend on people to do everything for me because I lost all my money. I literally had over $55,000 before I got locked up. And then everything basically disappeared. And I'm now dependent upon everybody. I got to ask people. I literally cried for about 6 months. There's no lie. Because everything that I had or that I depended on, that I felt I had got, is no longer there as a cushion, and I got to depend on people to do everything for me. So I lose everything. So I lost my sense of self in that aspect, that money was my cushion. I was a person that people looked to help provide. That was everybody that was up under me, who was looking for me to give them drugs, whatever the case may be. And I lost myself, my independence, but who I was to them. Now I am dependent upon my parents, who I hadn't looked to do anything for me my entire life, or up to 16. And I became somebody who was looking for love now. Somebody who they had to come literally to see, where I'm used to going to see them. So I went from independent to dependent, and I did not know how to depend. So that was like crushed. I had to, you said, who was I? I was in a relationship with a female who ended up marrying me while I was in prison. We got engaged a month before. She had 3 kids. I didn't have any kids. I don't have any that I know of now. And I had become a father figure to them. I had also become basically her fiance, or somebody that she was looking to form a life with. I lost everything in just a blink of an eye. One day, everything just flipped upside down. The coin was up, and now the coin was, look, tails are up. And I had to look at my life and realize, and did I believe in God then? Yes, I did. Normally, when things got bad, I called out on God. I went to church on Sunday and went to Bible study on Wednesday while I was selling drugs. However, did I have a full relationship with God? No, I did not. Not a full. And what I realized is that in the midst of me being in there, what God was doing was allowing me to be dependent, but not upon people, upon Him. And it rearranged my whole thought later. I now can look back and tell you the things I'm telling you now. During this process, I could not. When you ask me, who am I know now that I'm an artist. No, I am a child of God. I am an artist. I'm an author. I am a motivational speaker. I am a one who advocates for formerly incarcerated and everything else. But at that point in time, I was just a dependent human being who did not know where life was going, They gave me 23 years in prison. And to go from this to that was life-changing. A lot of us who are formerly incarcerated, and I did have me and my ex-wife, we ended up getting divorced and everything. She even stripped her kids away from me. So I went through changes in there because of things that it was a decision I made, but a decision that I also put other people in position to have to deal with. So I had to look at everything. I'm gonna try to make this fair. And what God showed me was kind of what Latasha learned. You don't find joy, peace, happiness, or anything outside of you. It comes from God within. You learn that God's supposed to be the center point of all of life. Because remember, he's a jealous God. So I do believe in God wholeheartedly. So it might even sound like I'm preaching. But what I found out was my peace don't come from people or things. I find peace there, and then all the pieces are brought back together. What I don't have an understanding for, I don't have to understand no more. I learned to my mental health,